Namaskar, hello and welcome viewers. You're watching the news with your host Kriti Mishra. Get ready for your daily dose of national and global developments. First up, the headlines this Tuesday evening. With Rajya Sabha's approval, Parliament passes the Chartered Accountants, Cost and Works Accountants and Company Secretaries Amendment Bill and the Delhi Municipal Corporation Amendment Bill. Discussion on Ukraine under Rule 193 in Lok Sabha, Weapons of Mass Destruction and Their Delivery Systems, Prohibition of Unlawful Activities Amendment Bill, also introduced in the lower house. Images from Bucha intensify demand for stricter sanctions against Russia. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denies allegations at UN Security Council meeting. 4 Pakistani origin YouTube channels among 22 blocked for spreading fake news. News website, 3 Twitter accounts and a Facebook account also shut down. Government cites threat to national security. Amid deepening economic crisis and widening public protests in Sri Lanka, 40 MPs walk out of the ruling coalition. President Rajapaksa's government loses majority. On to our flash news segment now. Prime Minister Modi to address BJP workers on the party's foundation day on Wednesday. 34 crore loans disbursed under Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana since inception of scheme in 2015. Union Minister Piyush Goyal arrives in Australia for 3-day visit. Delimitation Commission arrives in Srinagar. ED attaches land, plots, flat linked to Shiv Sena MP Sanjay Raut and his family. Delhi made it regional rapid transit system corridor likely to be completed by June 2025. Supreme Court agrees to hear PIL on electoral bond scheme. Gorakhnath Temple incident investigation handed over to UP Anti-Terror Squad and Special Task Force. Dearness allowance of government employees in Karnataka hiked by 2.75%. And heat wave predicted in Delhi and other states tomorrow. Now news from the ongoing budget session of Parliament of India. The humanitarian crisis and the current situation arising out of the Ukraine-Russia conflict was discussed in the Lok Sabha today. During the discussion, under the Rule 193, members of the ruling party praised the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and the success of Operation Ganga. Union External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar told the Lok Sabha that India has safely brought back 22,500 civilians to their homes under Operation Ganga. He informed that 90 flights were arranged, out of which 14 were Indian Air Force flights. Opposition members cautioned the government about the geopolitical and economic impact of the Ukraine crisis. They urged the government to play its part in ending the war and restoring peace.
The weapons of mass destruction and the delivery systems, Prohibition of Unlawful Activities Amendment Bill 2022.
Union Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia discussed in detail the efforts made by the government for the safe return of citizens of India stranded in Ukraine.
इस कठिनाई के समय में जहां हम अपने बच्चों को वापस लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उस समय में भी भारत का विशाल हृदय कि उस देश को भी हमें मदद करना होगा। प्रधानमंत्री जी का संकल्प और 90 टन ह्यूमैनिटेरियन एड हमने उस देश को पहुंचाया सभापति महोदय। लेकिन ये अतिशयोक्ति नहीं होगी सभापति महोदय अगर हम कहें कि ये शायद this has been the largest evacuation exercise in war by any country in the world in recent history.
And the government introduced the Weapons of Mass Destruction and the Delivery Systems, Prohibition of Unlawful Activities Amendment Bill in the Lok Sabha today. The bill seeks to ban funding of weapons of mass destruction and also empowers the centre to freeze, seize or attach financial assets and economic resources of people engaged in such activities. Introducing the bill, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar highlighted the need for an amendment into the existing bill. And the upcoming census will be digital for the first time, and people will have the option of self-enumeration. Union Minister of State for Home, Nityanand Rai, said in a written reply to a question in Parliament. The housing listing phase of the census and the exercise to update the National Population Register was scheduled to be carried out across the country from April 1st to September 30th, 2020, but had to be postponed due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The census operation continues to be on hold, and the government is yet to announce the new schedule. And Parliament passed the Chartered Accountant, Cost and Works Accountant and Company Secretary Amendment Bill 2021 on Tuesday. Replying on the bill in the upper house of Parliament, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman made it clear in the Rajya Sabha that these reforms will not affect the autonomy of any of the three institutions.
Of the councils responsible for the management of affairs of the institutes. The ICA has 40 members, 8 of them government nominees, 32 elected members. SI and the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, 5 government nominees and 15 elected members. The institutes, therefore, shall continue to function under overall control, guidance and supervision of their respective councils, which are as per their acts.
And the Rajya Sabha also passed the Delhi Municipal Corporation Amendment Bill 2022. Responding to the discussion, Union Home Minister Amit Shah said the integration of the 3 municipal corporations of Delhi has been done on the experiences on the past 10 years. He said that with this amendment, better utilization of resources can be ensured.
अनुच्छेद 239 ए के साथ अनुच्छेद 239 ए 3B के अनुसार संसद को दिल्ली संघ राज्य क्षेत्र या उसके किसी भी भाग के बारे में किसी भी विषय पर कानून बनाने का अधिकार प्राप्त है.
Moving on now, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla addressed the orientation program of the members of Maharashtra Legislative Assembly and Council. He asked members to always be sensitive to the responsibility of living up to the trust of the people. Speaker Birla said there should be active participation of legislators in taking the voice of the people to the House and in making public welfare laws. The Lok Sabha Speaker said it is necessary to have knowledge of Constitution, the rules and procedures of the House.
विधानसभा की या विधान परिषद की संपूर्ण नियम प्रणालियों को हमें पढ़ना चाहिए. वहां की परिपाटियों को, वहां की परंपराओं को, पुराने वहां के अनुभवों को हमें पता होना चाहिए.
And in other news now, President Ramnath Kovind on Tuesday arrived in Amsterdam on the last leg of his 2-nation tour. He was received by Dutch Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. President Kovind spoke about the multifaceted partnership between the two countries and people-to-people contact between the two countries. He also visited the tulip garden in Amsterdam, where a breed of tulip flower was named Maitri to mark 75 years of diplomatic relations between India and the Netherlands. 2 newly elected members of the BJP took oath of membership of Rajya Sabha. Sikandar Kumar of BJP from Himachal Pradesh and Manik Saha of Tripura were sworn in. Sikandar Kumar took oaths in Hindi while Saha took oaths in Bengali. 795 new cases of COVID-19 were reported in India in last 24 hours, the second day in a row when tally was under 1,000. The number of patients being treated has gone below 12,000. The national recovery of patient is 98.76%. The Stand Up India scheme completed its 6th anniversary on Tuesday. Prime Minister Modi launched the Stand Up India scheme on 5th April 2016. Loans are given to beneficiaries from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and women for greenfield enterprises in production, service and business sectors. Loans worth 30,160 crore have been given to 1,33,995 beneficiaries under the scheme. Prime Minister Modi has lauded the contributions of India's maritime sector in trade and commerce. In his message on National Maritime Day, he said in the last 8 years, the government is paying special attention to the development of ports. Heat wave is sweeping Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Telangana and some other parts of the country. The Met Department said it will continue for the next 5 days. It has also predicted high temperatures in Delhi NCR from Wednesday. And moving on, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has blocked 22 YouTube-based news channels, of which 4 were from Pakistan. The ministry said they were spreading fake news that could impact national security, foreign relations and public order. This is the first time that action has been taken against the Indian YouTube-based news publishers since the notification of IT Rules 2021 in February last year.
इन 22 YouTube चैनल्स पर कार्रवाई की गई, इनको तुरंत ब्लॉक कर दिया गया है और मैं आज एक बार फिर विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि जो भी ऐसे YouTube चैनल्स या कोई भी ऐसे डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म्स का उपयोग भारत के खिलाफ किया जाएगा दुष्प्रचार करने के लिए, भय भ्रम फैलाने के लिए या जो भारत की खिलाफ ऐसी ताकतें काम करेंगी उनके खिलाफ इसी तरह से कड़े कदम आगे भी भविष्य में उठाए जाएंगे.
Time for a short break now, but after the break, political crisis in Pakistan takes a new turn.
I appeal to all of you.
मामले में महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दों को उठाइए.
मैं आपकी अनुमति से.
कोई सरकार इस पे विचार कर रही है.
What is important for all of us to realize is.
What I wanted to ask the Honourable Minister.
What specific intervention are you doing?
पॉलिटिक्स कर देश में भेद खड़ा नहीं करना चाहिए.
सरकार इसके लिए निरंतर प्रयास कर रही है.
A report of the Department of Parliamentary Standing Committee.
प्रश्न ये है कि विधेयक पारित किया जाए.
हमारे मंत्रालय ने
6 साल में आम जनता तक पहुंचाने की व्यवस्था है.
Welcome back. You're watching the news. And let's talk about Sri Lanka now. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's ruling coalition lost its majority in parliament as proceedings began on Tuesday. The Lankan parliament was meeting for the first time since the state of emergency was imposed. At least 41 lawmakers walked out of the alliance. Earlier, President Rajapaksa had asserted that he won't resign from his position. On Tuesday, he said he was ready to hand over the government to whoever proves the majority in parliament. Meanwhile, protesters reached the residence of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, demanding his resignation. Protests also continued across the country, including the houses of at least 6 lawmakers. And joining me now to give an update on crisis in Sri Lanka is our correspondent, Teena. Teena, welcome to the news. Take us to the latest developments in Sri Lanka.
Kriti, the situation in Sri Lanka at present is just getting from bad to worse. Over the past few days, what we have seen is there's public anger, which has now spilled onto the streets. There were nationwide protests last week. In fact, the demonstrators marched towards the presidential palace, after which a state of emergency was declared in Sri Lanka. And since then, this economic crisis over which protests were happening is slowly turning into a constitutional crisis. So immediately after the state of emergency was announced, we saw that the entire cabinet resigned en masse in Sri Lanka. Then the finance minister, who happens to be the brother of the president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he was sacked, removed from his post. And then a new finance minister was brought in. But just a day after he was sworn in, he also has resigned. And also the ruling coalition, as on date, has run into a minority. So the things look really bad on ground. The people who are living there are struggling to make both ends meet. The price rise is something which is unprecedented. I was speaking to a journalist who joined me on my show this evening, and she was talking about how such scenes, in fact, the crisis of this scale has never been witnessed in Sri Lanka before. So the people who are living there, for them, it's very, very difficult to manage. There are long queues for the essential food items, also for the fuel. There is help being provided by countries like India. But of course, in the short term, this is going to be one very, very important step. But in the longer run, what's important is for the Sri Lankan government to reorganize, stand by the people, in fact, assure them that it is trying its best to mitigate the crisis.
Absolutely, Teena, you're making very valid points there. But as you were telling us that you're speaking to the experts, to the journalists, please tell our viewers what led to this crisis.
So, Kriti, what we are seeing today is there's a massive crisis, economic crisis in Sri Lanka. And as we have been looking at reports over the past few days, there are scenes which we have never witnessed in recent history when it comes to Sri Lanka. India has been standing by its neighbor as part of its neighborhood first policy. So we've extended cooperation in terms of line of credit as well. Yes. There are other friends who are trying to also help Sri Lanka. But what experts say that this is a crisis which hasn't happened overnight. So there are several factors which have contributed to a crisis of this scale in the island country. And a lot of experts, in fact, journalists, experts who joined me on the program today, took us through some of these factors, like a series of unilateral policy decisions which were taken by the Rajapaksa government. It is, in fact, a family-run government in Sri Lanka, as you know. So all the key posts in the ministerial, including the Prime Minister and the President, happen to be from the Rajapaksa family. So the people are now alleging a series of unilateral policy decisions which were taken, which went against the interest of Sri Lanka. And the COVID pandemic sort of dealt the final blow to this crisis that we are now seeing unfold in Sri Lanka. The COVID pandemic impacted two key sectors, tourism and remittances, which play a very, very significant role when it comes to foreign exchange reserves in the island nation. And these two having been impacted, and even prior to that, tourism was impacted. As you may recall, back in 2019, there was a major terrorist incident, terror attack in Sri Lanka, in which about 300 people were killed. And that, in a way, also impacted tourism. So even before the pandemic, things were not great, but the pandemic just turned the situation around for worse in this country. And now the Sri Lankan government needs to reorganize itself, think of ways to emerge out of this crisis.
All right, thank you so much, Teena Jha, for all those updates. And moving on now, Pakistan Supreme Court on Tuesday saw the record of the proceedings of the National Assembly conducted on the no-confidence motion filed against Prime Minister Imran Khan. The court said it wanted to ascertain the constitutionality of the steps taken by the Deputy Speaker in dismissing the no-confidence motion against the subsequent dissolution of National Assembly. On Sunday, the National Assembly Deputy Speaker ruled that the motion was linked to a foreign conspiracy to topple the government and was not maintainable. Minutes later, President Arif Alvi dissolved the National Assembly on the advice of Prime Minister Khan. The apex court said it wanted to see if the ruling of the Deputy Speaker could be reviewed by the bench. It added that the court will merely decide on the legitimacy of the Speaker's action. And moving on now, Ukrainian President Zelensky will address the UN Security Council for the first time since Russia's military operation in his country. Meanwhile, Russia has vehemently denied that it has any role in the killing of civilians in Ukraine that has sparked worldwide condemnation.
Russia has denied any role in the killing of innocent people in areas adjoining Kiev. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov dismissed Ukrainian accusations of atrocities against civilians as a staged provocation.
На днях очередная фейковая атака была предпринята в городе Буча Киевской области, после того, как оттуда вышли российские военнослужащие в соответствии с планами и достигнутыми договоренностями. Там через несколько дней была устроена инсценировка, которую разгоняют по всем каналам и социальным сетям украинские представители и их западные покровители.
The Russian representative at the United Nations accused Ukraine and the West of a false flag attempt. He accused Western nations of spreading Ukraine's lies. Other world leaders did not agree with him.
I think it's fairly obvious, not just to us, but to the world, that Russian forces are responsible for the atrocities in Bucha. Now, exactly who, what units, whether they're contractors or Chechens, I don't think we're able to say right now. But we're certainly not refuting that these atrocities occurred and that they occurred at the hands of Russians.
United Kingdom, Poland, Sweden and Germany have expressed shock and are thinking of imposing stricter sanctions against Russia. On Monday, Ukrainian President Zelensky took first-hand account in Bucha. He said at least 300 people were killed in the city. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And if you're living in the northern plains of India, you have experienced the warmest March in the last 122 years. This instance of climate change is not, of course, a one-off thing. Things are going to get worse if you do not act now and do something concrete to reverse the trend. Take a look at this report.
A study has suggested that these birds in Chicago are laying eggs 25 days earlier than they did in late 1800 and early 1900. The reason, scientists say, could be climate change. The change in these little birdies' nature may not alarm you, but it is the same change that caused wildfire that have gutted towns in Canada, Australia and the Amazon. It is the same change that is causing unseasonal rains, storms and other extreme weathers. A report by UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we have to do something now.
If we continue acting as we are now, we're not even going to limit warming to 2 degrees, never mind 1.5 degrees. Emissions in the last decade were the highest they've ever been and have continued to increase. Now that's the bad news.
The report calls for some important steps that include doing away with fossil fuels, increasing sustainable and clean sources of energy like solar and wind. It also suggests efforts to decrease in the demand for energy and developing food habits that result in less release of methane. In his address, the UN Secretary General accused nations of disrespecting their pledges towards the climate change.
We are on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5 degree limit agreed in Paris. Some government and business leaders are saying one thing but doing another. Simply put, they are lying. And the results will be catastrophic. This is a climate emergency.
The report, however, says some positive results of efforts have been seen. The need is now to understand that human activities got landed us in this problem and human agencies can actually get us out of it again. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And in other news from other parts of the world. Members of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe have reported flaws in Hungary's election process despite prior recommendations to even the playing field. They sent a full-scale election observation team to Hungary to monitor the April 3rd vote, only the second time it had done so in EU. Hungary's nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban won a landslide victory in Sunday's national elections. Iran has said that a renewed nuclear deal with world powers was very reachable, pending political decisions from the United States. Foreign Ministry spokesman Saeed told a briefing in Tehran that Iran will neither cross red lines nor back down from their demands. He also asserted that Iran will not wait forever as the negotiations broke off last month following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Hundreds of motorcyclists blocked streets in Bogota in protest against the city's new regulations, which ban more than one passenger per motorcycle on certain days and hours in order to tackle rising street crime. However, motorcyclists believe it is a measure that stigmatizes them more than controlling insecurity. The COVID-19 outbreak in China's largest metropolis of Shanghai remains extremely grim amid an ongoing lockdown, confining around 26 million people to their homes. The director of Shanghai's Working Group on Epidemic Control said the outbreak in Shanghai was still running at a high level and the situation is extremely grim. Shanghai recorded 13,354 more cases on Monday. The vast majority of them were asymptomatic. Victims of landmine explosions gathered outside Colombia's peace tribunal on Monday to demand an investigation into rebel groups that have placed explosive devices around the country, injuring thousands of civilians and military personnel. Colombia's government said more than 12,000 landmine victims are currently living in the country. The explosive devices continue to be used in remote rural areas by rebel organizations that are fighting over drug trafficking routes. Now, all the sporting action from the world of sports. And starting with badminton, World Championships bronze medalist Lakshya Sen has reached the second round of Korea Open Super 500 badminton tournament. Saints staved off a spirited challenge from local hope Shi Ji-hoon 14-21, 21-16, 21-18 in an over an hour in his opening round match. In the women's singles of the Korea Open Super 500 badminton tournament, India's Malvika too progressed to the second round, winning the first round match in 3 games. She had to rally to notch up a stunning 20-22, 22-20, 21-10 win over world number 24 Han Yue of China. In the IPL Battle Royale tonight, Rajasthan Royals are taking on Royal Challengers Bangalore. The 13th match of IPL is being played at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. Rajasthan Royals are currently leading the points table with 2 wins from 2 matches. New entrants Lucknow Super Giants registered their second win in 3 matches of IPL 2022. The KL Rahul-led team came up with an excellent all-round performance to beat Sunrisers Hyderabad by 12 runs. LSG batted first and put up a competitive 169 on board. Rahul scored 68 of 50 balls. Deepak Hooda made 51. And a 3-0 defeat at Crystal Palace has dealt a significant blow to Arsenal's bid to finish in the top 4 of the English Premier League. Gunners manager Michael described the performance as unacceptable. His side was destroyed by first-half goals. Arsenal's second defeat in their last 3 league games was sealed by Zaha's late penalty. And before we sign off, a relook at the headlines. With Rajya Sabha's approval, Parliament passes the Chartered Accountants, Cost and Works Accountants and Company Secretaries Amendment Bill and the Delhi Municipal Corporation Amendment Bill. Discussion on Ukraine under Rule 193 in Lok Sabha, Weapons of Mass Destruction and their Delivery Systems, Prohibition of Unlawful Activities Amendment Bill, also introduced in the lower house. Images from Bucha intensify demand for stricter sanctions against Russia. Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denies allegations at UN Security Council meet. 4 Pakistani origin YouTube channels among 22 blocked for spreading fake news. News website, 3 Twitter accounts and a Facebook account also shut down. Government cites threat to national security. Amid deepening economic crisis and widening public protests in Sri Lanka, 40 MPs walk out of ruling coalition. President Rajapaksa's government loses majority. Well, that's all we have for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Namaskar.